Okay, this is Jermaine Every live with my friends over at GoBlackKnights.com. Joe, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because we didn't do that in the pre-show talk. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself to the people.
No problem, Jermaine. Absolutely. I know there's a lot of Cajuns down in Louisiana, so this is an Italian name, so it's a little different. But Iacono, Joe Iacono is the last name, and appreciate you letting me do that. Yeah, I should have told you in the pregame. That's not me. So,
And I figured that was how you pronounce it because there's a little there's a pretty good Italian culture down there in New Orleans where I grew up and everything. But I was like, I think that's it. I'm not quite sure, but I'm just gonna play it safe and let him introduce
yeah,
himself.
we kind of Americanized it. Like if you were in Italy, it'd be Iacono, but Americans can't
Gotcha.
really pronounce that. So yeah,
Right. Yeah, man, it is what it is. But I am Death Valley's insider analyst, Jermaine Every here with Joe Iacono of GoBlackKnights.com. We're here doing crosstalk ahead of the LSU Army game this weekend. And just to make you feel a little bit more at home.
all right. That's very kind of you, Jermaine. I appreciate it.
We'll play a little bit of the fight song. I'm trying to jazz it up
on
just
brave
a
old
little
Army
bit.
team. I would sing it, but my singing voice isn't.
It's just one of those. I was like, you know what? What's something extra we can add to this? Every week that will kind of like have people like, hey, that's pretty cool. And the first thing I thought about was the Army fight song because you look at the tradition of Army and not just the school but also the sports, and especially if you go back further in the early to mid 1900s. Army has a huge tradition in football. So, what is it like covering a school that's a service academy, but also has a rich tradition in football?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, Jermaine, it's an honor to get to do anything with West Point and anything with the cadets that are just great Americans that have committed to their lives to a lifetime of service straight out of high school in a lot of cases. I'm a graduate of the academy myself, so I can relate very well with what goes on up there. And yeah, like you said, I mean, the tradition is really second to none. I mean, the newer, younger football fans may not be familiar with it, but anybody who's really a football historian, if you come to the College Football Hall of Fame down here in Atlanta, where I live, there's a lot of Army stuff there. We've had 3 Heisman Trophy winners back in the 40s and 50s with Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. They were on the same team. They just whipped through their entire schedule. If you ask Lee Corso, who's the greatest football team of all time, he'll say that 1946 Army team that just beat everybody by 50, 60 points. There were some things with the war that allowed us to recruit better at the time and everything. So get all that. And then in 58, Pete Dawkins, who a lot of people know, he's a really successful businessman and politician and done a number of things. He was the 1958 Heisman Trophy winner. And then Army won 3 national championships back to back from 44 to 46. So we have a really rich football history. For the LSU fans, you guys are huge football fans. I mean, LSU football culture is well known all over the world and or at least all over America. And if you ever get a bye week, I highly recommend coming to Mikey Stadium up at West Point. Put that on your bucket list. It's one of the most beautiful stadiums in America. A lot smaller than Death Valley, obviously, but really, really pretty, with Lusk Reservoir in the background and all the leaves turning colors, and just a great way to spend a football Saturday.
Yeah, I've actually seen video highlights. I want to say I've watched the game before on TV, but being there in person, it has to be something different because you're not only getting that scenery, but just like that atmosphere, the pageantry, the tradition, and everything else. And it's like the way they act, going into the game and whatnot. It's just there's so much there. It's just I can't imagine like how that must be like being in that moment. So definitely a bucket list item because one of my other bucket lists is to do the Army Navy game. I want to probably. I thought about it, and I was like, if I ever had like a bucket list of sporting events, what would be on that bucket list? And I think Army Navy is like pretty up there.
Army Navy is awesome. It's, I've been to a lot of big football games, Jermaine. I'm a big time college football fan, not just Army. And I know the SEC has some phenomenal rivalries, right? I've lived in the heart of SEC country for close to 20 years now. So I completely understand the rivalries in the SEC. But there's just something special, something different about Army Navy. Packed stadium. This year it's in Foxborough at Gillette, but it's always in a pro stadium on the East Coast, packed out, 70, 75,000 fans, depending on which stadium it is. Always a sellout. You've got, everybody who's anybody in America, right? The president comes to a lot of the games, the vice president, the secretary of defense. They're all taking sides. It is crazy. You got flyovers with the Apaches and the F-14s and the F-18s. And it is what's really cool about that game. Jeff Monken, our head coach at Army, calls it a 60-minute fist fight. You line up across from each other and you get in a bare knuckle brawl for 5 seconds and you line up and do it all over again. And what makes the game really cool, when you go beyond all the pageantry and stuff, which is awesome, you got the march-ons of the Corps cadets and the Brigade of Midshipmen. But what makes the game itself really cool, all the athletes are pretty evenly matched, right? I talked about this a little bit in the questions Jefferson asked me. The academies really compete against each other in recruiting. So the athletes are extremely evenly matched. And for a lot of them, if they don't go on to the NFL, which is 99% of them, it's the last time they'll ever suit up and play a competitive football game. So they are getting after it, barring a bowl game or whatever now, I guess. But they're getting after it big time. And you go on the campus at West Point or down in Annapolis, and at West Point, the first day I was there, the bleachers on the plane at the parade field beat Navy. There's a beat Navy tunnel that you walk through to go to Eisenhower Hall. You can't you can't look at anything at West Point for more than 10 minutes without seeing the words beat Navy. You actually greet upperclassmen with beat Navy, sir.
Man, that is crazy. Like it's that kind of stuff that just, it adds a little bit more to a rivalry like that. It just the dedication to it, and the it's almost like indoctrination, like beat Navy, sir, like to greet an upperclassman. Like that's just it's stuff like that you don't really find anywhere else.
Exactly. You can. I know, and Auburn, Alabama, I know says the same thing. We could lose every game as long as we win that game. It's right. Still a good season, and that's the statements like that are always a little bit of a stretch. But losing the Navy can ruin a season, and I've seen that. In 2021, Army had a really good team. We went 9-4, beat Missouri in the bowl game, but lost to Navy, and it kind of put a damper on the whole season.
Yeah, that I can see where that could, like, and it's like Michigan, Ohio State is like that as well. There's a few different things, different rivalries where if you lose to that team, like that's just like you could go 11-1, but if that one loss is to that one rival, like I could see. But getting into this game this weekend, these two teams have only played a total of one time.
That's amazing when you look at the history of both programs. Right?
Exactly. As long as both programs have been around, one time, it was in 1931, Army won 20-0.
I know. So 1-0.
Exactly. So LSU needs to even the score this weekend. This is to me, this is a big game because this team can't lose another game and still expect to try to play for an SEC championship and maybe have a far outside shot at a college football playoff. But like I keep saying, they still have a chance to win a national to win their division and play in the SEC championship. They need some help from Ole Miss losing a couple more games, but they can't drop any more games. And LSU always inexplicably loses a game every year that they shouldn't have. They lost one earlier this year to Ole Miss. So I say, okay, you've lost the game that you shouldn't have lost because you were ahead, you had it, and then you just let it go to pieces. To me, a game where they're favored by 32 and everybody in the world is picking them, it could still be somewhat of a trap game. Do you see this game being somewhat of a trap game at all for LSU?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a trap game, right? It's almost the definition of a trap game. They're coming in, they're big win off against Auburn last week. I don't know what you thought, Jermaine, but I saw some of that game. I thought that was the best LSU's played. I haven't seen every game they played, but I've seen like 3 of their games, and I thought that was their best effort. I thought the defense really showed up for the first time, maybe all season. And so I was really impressed, right? They're rolling out, and like you said, they're thinking, let's win the West, let's try and get to the SEC championship. Here comes Army. We painted the end zones camo. It's going to be military appreciation. Pat them on the back, like, hey, welcome to LSU. Let's go out and whip them, right? And that as Herm Edwards says, that's why you play the game. So it's kind of it's a classic trap game. I mean, do I think Army really has a chance? No, but it's a classic trap game. So.
Yeah, and I gotta email Jefferson my prediction tonight, soon as we wrap up here. So, like, I'm trying to plan everything out, and I'm looking at the game, and I'm just like, when I look at it, okay, LSU 9 times out of 10 is going to win this game, but how is it going to look? And to me, most people think a trap game is something that a team loses. And I don't always say that a team will lose a trap game, because a team can just play bad and win, but not look very impressive winning that game. And I definitely see this as a trap game. But looking at these two teams and looking at what they can do and what they bring to the table, when I have these crosstalks, I look at the other team and I look at their strengths, I look at their weaknesses, and I see Army is a running team still. Average almost 200 yards a game on the ground. LSU still has an issue stopping the run, because they even though they give up like about 160 a game, to me, it's how those other teams get that 160, because there's teams that will throw the ball all over the field and not even try to run the ball against LSU. And then there are teams who will commit to the run. So just by looking at it, seeing as running is the strength, who on the Army side of the offense is somebody that this LSU defense needs to point at as a playmaker, or somebody that's like, hey, when we line up, we need to make sure where this guy is going, where he is, whether it's a lineman, a quarterback, running back, whoever it is. Who is that guy on this Army offense?
So unfortunately, Army's coming into this game with a number of injuries to some of those key playmakers. So that's not going to be exciting. But the number one guy, if I'm playing for LSU, or if I'm LSU's DC, that I have my eyes on, is number 21, Terrell Robinson. When you look at him, he doesn't look like much. He's kind of tiny, but the kid can fly. He's super shifty. Coming back off an ACL injury in the Wake Forest game last year. He missed the first couple games this year. First game back was against Boston College. We ran a nice RPO to him right down the sideline, play action. And if the quarterback leads him, he's in the end zone. He threw it a little behind him, ended up being about a 25-yard gain. But Robinson's got some shake, as good as anything I've seen in the Power 5 conferences. So that would be my number one guy. Number two would be kind of a guy who's really stepped up the last game, was our leading rusher against Troy with, I think, 18 carries or 25 carries for 120-ish yards. Freshman named Kanye Udo, who's got a lot of power and a lot of wiggle as well. So those are really the two guys I'd pay a lot of attention to if I were LSU in the running game. Robinson's more of an outside threat, a little more speed. Udo will bang you between the tackles.
Yeah, and I look at those two guys, looking at them. Robinson's about 5'9", 180. Udo's about 6 foot 220. They have a real thunder and lightning thing going on, because with those smaller, shiftier, shorter kind of guys that are kind of low to the ground, low center of gravity, and they're kind of shifty but quick, It kind of reminds me of when LSU had Trendon Holiday,
Yeah.
and Trendon was about 5'5", 5'6", maybe about 165.
Yep.
You couldn't see him behind the line
Right.
because he was so short, and then he literally had track speed. He was a track athlete.
Yep.
So it's like you have a track guy who you can't see behind this massive offensive line, and he squirts out of nowhere, and then next thing you know, it's 60 yards later, touchdown. But
Yeah.
then you have Udo, who's like this big bowling ball, kind of like LSU's freshman running back Caleb Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
and they're about the same size.
Yep.
In every game, Caleb Jackson has had a play where he runs over an opposing defender and just embarrasses him.
Yeah.
So when I see you guys have a guy like that, a Thunder and a Lightning, LSU doesn't have a real, Lightning guy, but they have a lot of Thunder. So I can see where that would present a problem because this defense has gotten stretched to the sidelines, and they've even gotten attacked up the middle of some with some success here and there. It really just depends on, to be honest with you, is how physical this defensive front decides they're going to be when they're trying to stop the run. Because when I look at, like, let's say the Arkansas game, the Ole Miss game, and not really the Auburn game, but I'll say the Arkansas and the Ole Miss game. Because Arkansas, that was another team that LSU was favored to win big, and they barely won. Ole Miss was a game that they were favored to win. They were playing like crap the whole game, came back and started. They had a 9-point lead and then gave it up.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, and it's like what Ole Miss was doing. Ole Miss would run them to the sidelines and then run them up the middle, run them to the sidelines, run them up the middle. So they were trying to stretch this defense and make them chase them sideline to sideline, but then still bang up the middle with that middle run. One other thing that I'm interested in when I look at this game is this LSU offense has been rolling.
Yeah.
Nobody has really stopped them. They've kind of like LSU's really stopped themselves this year. They are their own worst enemy. When Jaden Daniels lines up and he's looking across that field, who is that Army defender that he needs to point out like, hey, there's 2246, there's that guy. Watch him. Who is that guy for the Army defense?
So the defense this year honestly has struggled a little bit more than we expected. The defense has been our strength the last 5-6 years. And they've really struggled a little bit this year. But if I were to pick out one guy defensively, and if you look on the stat sheet, he doesn't have many stats because he's a kind of a shutdown corner. You've seen teams stay away from him, and that's number 4, Jabari Moore. He's a fifth-year senior, which is unusual at Army, and I think he's played in about 50 college football games now.
Wow.
And he is really talented, really good cover corner. He'll be tested, obviously, with the skill of Daniels and LSU's wide receivers, but pretty much every team we've played so far, for the most part, has stayed away from Moore, which is why you don't see a lot of stats on his stat sheet, and you see a lot more on Cameron Jones, the opposite corner, because that's who people have tried to test. And Jones isn't bad either, honestly. So,
yeah, and I see Jabari is from Hoover, Alabama, which has a rich high school football tradition. So I could see why they would want to, okay, well, let's, this guy's really good. Let's test the other corner. Plus, when you look at Cameron Jones, I don't know why, but people always feel like 5'9" corners are the ones to be picked on.
Yeah.
And I learned from a good buddy of mine who played cornerback. He was like, a lot of the times guys want to pick on those smaller corners, but they don't understand, like, they get under you and in you if you're a receiver, and they bother you so much.
Yeah.
Like he said, a bigger corner like he was like, you obviously see I'm there and my size and skill and speed and everything, so you probably will stay away. But he said with those smaller corners, he says the offenses will try to test them simply because they're short. And they think that, oh, well, I'll just throw the ball up. No big deal.
Right.
Until you see that guy's leaping ability or his coverage skills where he's knocking the ball out. So I could see why teams would want to try to test Cameron Jones because he's shorter and he's the opposite corner of a guy like a Jabari Moore. Looking at this Army defense, though, they've only given up averaging 100 and, 350 given up in the game, roughly 175 on the ground, 175 in the air. It's pretty well balanced. So with those two corners you mentioned, how do you think this Army defense will fare against this LSU run game? Because I think that's an underrated matchup in this game is LSU's run offense against Army's run defense.
Right. Well, Nate Woody, the defensive coordinator at Army, and Jeff Monken have always based their philosophy on you got to stop the run and make teams one dimensional. That's how you win defensively, right? It's a proven, known philosophy. There's been some issues, even though on the stat sheet it doesn't look bad. If you look at the yards per carry of some of our recent opponents, it's now Troy. They've got the number one running back in the country, so I understand it. I get
that's an outlier,
but it's the I talked with Caleb Fortner, who's our starting sophomore inside linebacker yesterday after practice, actually, and he talked about that the front seven really has to do their job, needs to make sure that they're focusing on their triangle and they see a little, see a lot, and that they're spilling when they need to spill and boxing when they need to box, because sometimes kids make mistakes in those areas, and that's what creates a big play. So, stopping the LSU run game, I think, is going to be a challenge. I think Brian Kelly has shown that he's willing to rely a little more on the run the last couple of weeks. And, I think that'll be, if Army can slow down the running game at LSU, I think that's the one thing that might make this game closer than the experts think. If LSU can just run the ball at will, it's going to be a beatdown. If Army can kind of slow that down a little bit, then I think they've got a puncher's chance, maybe.
Yeah, and to me, even though they played Troy last week, and Kamani Vidal, the nation's leading rusher, he's averaging 6.2 yards a carry. He only averaged 5 against Army, but his longest run was only 13 yards. I knew it was something about that game that kind of stuck out to me, and I was like, that Army defense did a pretty darn good job against stopping the nation's leading rusher. Yeah, but the biggest thing. No, go ahead.
I was going to say they got we turned the ball over a lot in that game, and Troy had their average starting field position was their own 40, I think, and they had the ball in plus territory a lot. And the defense only surrendered 1 touchdown and 4 field goals. So they did a really nice job on short fields.
And the thing is like you said, when you're, -3 in the turnover margin, it doesn't matter how bad you stop the run. You keep giving the other team chances, and they're just going to eventually you're going to turn the ball over and give them field position, and they're going to score. So I could see why. But like I was saying, that defense held him to 5 yards per carry, and his longest run was 13 yards. So they weren't letting him just get off like he's used to. And that's something that sometimes I think this LSU run game, it can be a lot better than what it is. Do I think that they rely on the pass too much? I would say no, simply because I just feel like when you have a strength, you accentuate your strength. And so what is the strength? And LSU's obvious, their pass offense is their strength. What is the strength of this Army offense? What do they do well that you feel it could be something that could also help spur them on the victory, not just slowing down LSU's run game, but trying to put some points on the board? What do they do best? What do they do well?
So if you go all the way back to the second game of the season, Army went down to San Antonio to face the Roadrunners, right? UTSA, defending Conference USA champs. Now in the American Athletic Conference, UTSA was a 5 or 6 point favorite. And we went down there and rolled up 37 points on UTSA. That was the best game Army's offense has played all season. What they did really well in that game, they converted 6 fourth downs. They were 6 for 6 on 4th down. And running between the tackles. Again, with Kanye Udo, he had a run. It's kind of been a social media sensation. It was against Troy. Basically, he got hit about 5 or 6 yards after the line of scrimmage, and the tight end Josh Lingenfelter and the rest of the O-line got behind him and kind of just did a rugby scrum, and he ended up gaining 25 yards.
Wow.
He just carried the whole defense. So we also have a senior running back named Jacoby Buchanan, who's a short yardage back who hasn't gotten a ton of playing time, but he's never been stopped on 4th and short in his career.
Wow.
He's about 260, and he's a load. So between the tackles, and if Bryson Daly, Army's starting quarterback, does end up getting the start, he got hurt in the last game against Troy, so we're not sure of his status. If he does get the start, he's 6 foot 215. He was a two-way player down in Austin, Texas in high school. He played quarterback and linebacker, and he's built like a linebacker. And he has no problem running between the tackles and mixing it up with linebackers and guys at the second level and falling forward just about every time he gets tackled. So if Army can, and they don't need to go crazy, if they can get 3 to 4 yards a carry inside the tackles and just keep grinding clock and keep the LSU offense off the field. Against UTSA, they had over 40 minutes time of possession. So that is really the game plan to win. Convert a lot of 3rd and shorts and 4th and shorts and dominate between the tackles. And again, domination for Army doesn't mean 6 and 7 yards a carry. 3 and 4 yards consistently. Don't give up any negative plays. Don't turn the ball over. Don't commit any penalties. Army's got a shot.
Yeah, and this is why I keep going back and forth when it comes down to the final score, the prediction, and everything. And I swear, every week, it doesn't matter who they play, I always waffle back and forth about how this is going to look, how this game is going to play out. And then I have all these scenarios that I'm playing over in my head. And I keep thinking, like, this team is always tough. This team is not going to back down. And they for damn sure won't quit. So it's going to be just like you said, that Army-Navy game is a 60-minute bare-knuckle brawl. That is how this Army team plays every single game. And whoever they're playing is always in for a dogfight. It doesn't matter if LSU can out-talent them. They're going to be in for a fight. So when I look at this game and I look at the final prediction, 9 times out of 10, LSU is going to win this game. It just is what it is. Give me your final prediction, final score. How do you think this game is going to go and what the final score is going to be?
So Army fans are going to kill me. But I'll try and make this short, but 2018, we went down to Norman and took Oklahoma to overtime and lost. OU ended up making the playoffs that year. We held their juggernaut offense led by Kyler Murray to 28 points, including overtime. Yep. The following year, we go into Ann Arbor. We take them to double overtime and honestly should have won that game. We had 2nd and goal at the 1 in the 3rd quarter. Fullback false started, and we ended up throwing an interception on that drive. That's what ended up making the game go into OT. So is that type of game possible? Yes. However, unfortunately, what I've seen out of Army's offense the last couple of weeks, and our best defense against a super talented team like LSU is always playing keep away and keeping our offense on the field, right? This team, the 2023 version of Army, unfortunately, has given up too many turnovers, too many negative plays on offense. Unless they can right the ship, and especially with the possibility of us having to start a true freshman at quarterback, who's our number 2 QB. And he's good. The kid's super talented, but he's a true freshman walking into Death Valley on a Saturday night. So
exactly.
I don't see this one being close. I have LSU actually winning around 48-14, which is right about where the spread is. In order for that to change, like I said, Army's got to dominate the line of scrimmage, got to do well in between the tackles. If they cannot turn the ball over and they can cause 1 or 2 turnovers, and the other thing that can flip this game, Jermaine, is special teams. Yes. Army's special teams coach, Sean Saturnio, has been there for 10 years along with Jeff Monken. He's from Hawaii, really awesome guy. The kids love him. He was up for the Broyles Award for best assistant in the country last year. He was a semifinalist for that, I believe.
Nice.
Army's special teams is awesome. Our kicker usually kicks the ball out of the end zone. Our field goal kickers only missed one kick on the year.
Wow.
Punter's been a little shaky, but we are, I believe, in the top 5 in the country in blocked kicks,
Wow.
and have been that way for the last 3 or 4 years. So if Army can get a blocked punt or a blocked field goal and turn it into something, that's a huge, as you know, huge momentum swing, huge play in the game.
Big time.
And now we got a different ball game. So I really think the key for Army is going to be don't turn the ball over and block a kick. That's going to be what they need to do.
And honestly, when I was going to give my prediction, I was going to put special teams as a reason why I felt like Army could have a shot to make this game look a little bit more respectable than just, they I don't think they'll get blanked, because this LSU defense sometimes will just fall asleep at the wheel, no matter who they're playing. But right. I just think that the mistakes that LSU tends to make on special teams, coupled with the way you just laid out how Army plays good special teams, it even strengthens that conviction even more for me that something on special teams will happen that will spark something for Army, whether it'll be a score, a block kick, a return, whatever it is. I just feel it now, because even though LSU has gotten control of the muffed punts and the kickoff return flubs and things like that, it's still something that at the back of my mind, it still plays, because I know this team, and I've seen this team do this way too much this year, where they'll just have these inexplicable brain farts with penalties and bad plays, a misread, an overthrown pass, or something at a key part of a game. Will they'll either give their opponents life or make them feel like they have hope, or it's a game changer and they're shooting themselves in the foot. But final score, I think we hit the over and LSU covers. I'm going to say 52-13. Army's going to kick 2 field goals. They're going to get field position. They're going to be able to kick 2 field goals. And like I said, inexplicably, at least once a game, this defense will fall asleep at the wheel, and Army's going to have a drive and score a touchdown. So I see 52-13 in this game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good prediction there, Jermaine. So
yeah, it's one of those things, man, where, like sometimes I got told once that, and it wasn't even an LSU fan or a subscriber. It was just a casual fan who happened to hear it, like a friend of mine. And they were like, "Don't you work for them?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" He was like, "Dude, you're kind of harsh." I was like, "I have to tell the truth. Like, I have to be a reputable journalist."
I completely understand that. It's funny, it's interesting working with Go Black Knights and working with Army, because you can't really be critical of play. These kids aren't going to go play on Sundays, 99% of them, right? They're serving their country. So you got to be really careful about criticizing individual players. We can jump on the coaches, but that's about the extent of it. And it's funny because I'm friends with some of the kids' parents and stuff, and I tell them all the time, look, like, I have massive respect for your sons. You'll never hear me criticize their character. But I'm like, sometimes I got to do my job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was telling my friend, I was like, hey, look, like, they won, but they played like crap. I have to call it like I see it. Like,
yeah, well, and the standard at LSU, right? I live an hour from Athens. The expectation is national championship. The standard at LSU is an SEC or a national championship, right?
Yep.
So
anything less than that, and it's like, you got to get out of here. Yeah. They ran off Les Miles. They ran off Coach O. Yep. They'll run off anybody. If you don't win and produce in Baton Rouge, they will get you up out of there. So,
the people the players y'all can recruit, and just the in-state talent in Louisiana is great too. One of our best recruiters, a guy named Mike Vitti, he played fullback at Army, and now he's the offensive line coach. He recruits Louisiana and Texas for us. Does a great job. Our captain on offense is a kid named Connor Finucane. He's an offensive tackle, moved from guard to tackle with the new offense. He graduated from Catholic High there in Baton Rouge. And
Oh,
really,
football
really good
powerhouse,
Louisiana
Catholic High,
player.
Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Football powerhouse down there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually, gosh, it is I'm trying to think of the school, but I'll have to text a friend of mine. I went to high school with him, and he was the quarterback when I was in high school.
Oh,
And
wow.
his son was playing wide receiver, but for whatever reason, I don't know what happened, but they put him back at quarterback. I think this is his senior year. And he was just kind of frustrated, upset because he's like, man, if I was wide receiver, I have a better chance of getting recruited. But he's like, because I'm a really undersized quarterback, like I may not have a shot. And I was like, look, there's a kid about his size that I just went to go interview a few weeks ago, Jelani Watkins up in Humble. I said, he's about the same size as Braylon. I said, and Jelani's a 4-star wide receiver. I said, the kid, good kid, solid kid, and everything. I said, so tell him don't give up. There's always somebody watching. And when I watch Braylon play, and I'm not just saying this because it's my friend's kid, I think about this Army offense. He may not be the traditional like 5'8", 5'9", like 200-pound, like, you know, yoked up, like looking like a small linebacker type of quarterback that Army traditionally has. But I think of a kid like that running an offense like this, and it's like he'd be electric because he's quick, fast, and tough for a small kid. But
Absolutely. And that's,
Braylon
that's
Bird,
what Jeff
Kinder
Monken looks
Discovery.
for. So
Braylon Bird at Kinder Discovery. Tell him to check him out if he can.
absolutely.
But if
Absolutely. Thanks for the heads up.
if
Yeah.
I get I'll try to get a hold of my friend tonight and see where his film and stuff is. But I know, like, I was texting him the other day and I was like, dude, like, I'm looking at him make reads and whatnot, and like just the decision making and whatnot. I'm like, dude, that kid is good and he can play at the next level. I don't know where, but there's a spot for him to play at the next level. And
what was the name of the high school again, Jermaine?
I believe it's Kinder Discovery.
Okay.
I'll text you the info and everything as soon as I hear back from him, but I believe it's Kinder Discovery. But I know, like, a school like a LSU or like these big Power 5 schools, they may not recruit a kid like that, but I know a team like an Army or somebody, like, they could find a spot for him and use him because
absolutely.
he's a good athlete.
And we traditionally under Monken recruit a lot of quarterbacks and linebackers because they're typically the best athletes on that side of the ball.
Definitely.
And so we may convert them to something else once they get here, but we have, like, in any given, like this year's recruiting class, I think he recruited 6 or 7 quarterbacks. So he's got a ton.
And LSU has one, Lafayette Christian, Jawan Johnson. He's coming in as an athlete. He plays quarterback, and the kid is just he's somebody, when you watch him play, you're like, gosh, I wonder what he'd do at wide receiver. I wonder what he'd do at corner. I wonder what he'd do if you just let him play quarterback on a few plays, like, and it's just those type of athletes, or like you said, it's who y'all recruit, because it's like, we can find a spot for you in our system. We just need good football players, good character guys, and good athletes.
Yeah, we actually, this is a funny story. We have an offensive tackle named Shane Buckingham, who's from down here in Decula, Georgia, and he was a quarterback in high school. He came in at about 220, and now he's about 285, 290. They moved him from QB to tight end and from tight end to tackle. So
goodness. Yeah, there was a kid, gosh, who was it that LSU recently played that I did a crosstalk with? Auburn last week.
Okay.
They have a defensive lineman who's like 6'6", about 280, 290. And I want to say he's a freshman. And they told me, they were like, yeah, we recruited him. He was a linebacker. We actually had him gain weight so he could play on the line. And I was like, well, dude, wait a minute. You guys recruited a 6'6", probably 240 or 50-pound linebacker out of high school?
Can you imagine that kid in high school? Can you imagine having I was an offensive guard in high school. I can't imagine having to block a guy that big.
Man,
I had to block Tony Siragusa's little brother. That was bad enough.
Oh my God, bless your heart. Because I can imagine how big that kid was.
No, he was huge.
Yeah, but
I just tried to cut him every play.
That's the best thing you can do. I remember watching my little cousin play, and we call him. I still call him Lil Mike, even though he's huge. He's like 6'3", about 340. But he played offensive line, and he was going against this 5-star defensive tackle his junior year. And I'm watching him, and I'm like, Mike, you handled him pretty good. Like, you did pretty good job. And he was like, yeah, he was like a big guy like that. He's big, he's strong and everything. He was like, I hate when I have to go against those smaller guys. Because he says, they're not even looking to engage me in a block. They're just trying to like jump at my legs or like do something crazy to like, disengage me or take me out of the play or whatever. So I don't get to the second level. But he said, as an offensive lineman, I hate going against some of those smaller, quicker, like defensive linemen because that's all they do, and vice versa.
Yep. Army's got a kid you'll see Saturday night who I think does a really nice job. His name's Austin Hill. He's one of our defensive captains. He's a DE and he's 250. But he's quick and he can move. He can make some plays. Kid's solid.
Yeah, I love guys like that because like when you have a good, solid, just an athlete coming off that edge, a lot of the times they can affect the run by getting in that backfield so quickly. And people always say, well, they may leave the run lane open on that side. Well, if you have that kind of guy on that side, you tell him, hey, when this is a run play and we're going, you're rushing up the field for the run, don't rush as wide. There are certain things you can tell him, maybe take a wide step and make an inside move. There's certain things you can coach that can help that kid come off that edge better at that undersize.
Yeah.
So I'm still looking forward to this game. And one thing I know about this game that I'm really looking forward to is that LSU won't be able to rest on their laurels, even if they're up big, because like I said earlier, Army's going to continue to fight.
Yeah, that's one thing I can guarantee all the LSU fans who've never seen Army play, you're going to get 60 minutes. If LSU's up 30 or 40 points, Army, it might frustrate some folks, but Army will be calling timeouts, trying to figure out doing whatever they can do to get the ball in the end zone because every play counts and every play prepares them for the Commander-in-Chief's games against Air Force and Navy later in the year. So they're gonna go all 60. I can
tell in the live game thread this week. I know if LSU's up by 3 or 4, 5 touchdowns or whatever, somebody's gonna say, why are they calling a timeout? And I'm gonna politely say, guys, Joe told us this on Crosstalk. Army's still trying to figure some things out. Just bear with them. Let them figure it out.
But every point counts. Absolutely. Which also could make it interesting for the folks who have money on this game.
Big time. Because I know when, like, typically I'll put out my prediction, but then I'll look at what our gambling guru AJ Hoffman from pregame.com. I'll always go back and look. Let me see what AJ says about this game before I place a bet or something. Okay, AJ says it. Okay, I'm gonna ride with AJ because he's the professional. So I'm gonna go with whatever he says. There was one game where he thought the under would hit, and I was like, I don't know. I think I'm gonna ride with the over, and I went against him, and I made just a small bet, and I was just like, man, the one time I was right and he was wrong and I won that bet, I placed I should have placed a bigger bet. But it was funny because my girlfriend was like, well, if you felt so strongly about it, why didn't you just make a bigger bet? And I was like, it's gambling.
Because, and you were going against your expert, AJ, exactly. You're questioning yourself, right? It's hard to say with our new offense, but Army Navy the last like 16, 17 years has hit the under. So that game's always lower scoring than people.
But I'm gonna start paying attention to that because I love watching that game, and I never bet on it, but I just love the game itself and everything. But I'm gonna start paying attention to that and look at that trend because I could see how that game would definitely be an under. It's just depending on where Vegas puts that number. The number for this game is 60, and the line is 32. So obviously they think LSU is going to score a whole hell of a lot, and Army's not going to score very much. It is what it is. Well, Joe, it was good talking to you, man. Thank you so much for coming through and doing this crosstalk with me. I really, really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure, Jermaine. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Uh, I love big time college football, and there's nobody more big time than LSU. So I'm excited about that.
Man, we appreciate it. I can't wait. Look forward to this game, man. And you are like in the hub, literally the hub of college football down there in Atlanta. So
Yep.
I know every Saturday is like a huge deal down there in Atlanta in the heart of football country.
Absolutely. But tomorrow I'm getting on a plane and heading to Baton Rouge. So I'm excited.
Hey, if you get there, go to the tailgates if you can, and just they're gonna take care of you. I just sent Matt Cohen from Auburn's rival site. I told him where to go. I was like, look, if you go there, you're staying here, go here, here, and here. And he was like, cool, I'll let you know. So I forgot, I gotta text him and see how was his experience last week in Baton Rouge.
Oh, awesome. Super cool. Yeah,
All right,
I'm
man.
excited to get some good Louisiana food. Thank you, Jermaine. Appreciate it, man.
That's the part that everybody looks forward to when they go down there is the food. But we're gonna go ahead and cut it here. This has been Crosstalk, Death Valley Insider, GoBlackKnights.com. For Joe Iacono at GoBlackKnights.com, I'm Jermaine Every here at Death Valley Insider. This has been Crosstalk.